In this video, I'm going to share 5 ways you can avoid a contractor nightmare. I'll never forget getting a call from some investors in the Northwest. They had bought some properties from a wholesaler here in Birmingham who was going to renovate them and then rent them themselves. They sent them all the money up front to get these properties renovated, and then they were waiting expectantly for these properties to get rehabbed and rented. But weeks turned into months. After months, they eventually got on a plane and flew down to Birmingham, contacted us, and we walked with them through each one of these properties. And not to our surprise, but definitely to their surprise, these properties were not rehabbed. As a matter of fact, they had fled town. They had taken all their money, which was in the tens of thousands of dollars, and left town. Now, that's an extreme case. However, there are some things that you and I can do to avoid a contractor nightmare. So I want to share them with you right now. Number 1 is never give a contractor an upfront budget. What I mean by this is you never want to say to your contractor, hey, I've got $20,000 to do this rehab, and have them actually out there trying to fit the scope of work into that budget. Or even worse is if they come away with work that's $15,000 and they're going to take the rest of the $20,000. You never want to give them that budget. What I mean by this is your budget may influence this contractor one way or the other, either to skimp on materials or to overdo what they're spending on this rehab, and you don't want that. What you want is their best estimate based on the needs of the neighborhood. So you want to look at rental comparables. How are these things furnished? What are the fixtures? What are the appliances? Those types of things. You want to get an estimate that is very much like the neighborhood, and you can influence that one way or the other if you give them a budget up front. I would allow a contractor to go out to the property, give you a scope of work, and tell you exactly how much it's going to cost, and then give you an itemized list of all of those things, what they're going to charge you for. And it's typically going to be labor and materials. So just do yourself a favor. Don't give them a budget up front. Let them come back to you. And typically you have some type of window to do this in before you actually purchase the property. So you put it under contract. You may have 5 to 10 days for your due diligence. And that's when you want to send a contractor out to do all that work and bring it back just to make sure that the budget that they're giving you fits in with your investment objectives. Number 2 tip to avoid a contractor nightmare is never pay the full amount up front. This is not typical. However, a lot of contractors may ask you for a lot up front. Maybe it's not all of it up front. They may ask you for 50% or 75%. And what we would say is, don't have a relationship with this contractor. If you don't have a great relationship full of trust, then I would look at something more along the lines of pay as you go. So you can have them send reports back to you. It just really depends on how big the work is going to be. If there's a roof involved, if there's electrical involved, is there HVAC involved? Some of these bigger ticket items probably need to be paid as soon as it's finished because they're outsourcing that to somebody, a licensed electrician or HVAC company. And so you want to make sure that you're paying the right amount as the project is finished. And you definitely want to get verification that these things have been done along the way. So you never want to pay this money up front because you may encourage this contractor to just take their time in finishing your project. And what you want to do is reward them as they go. Third tip to avoid a contractor nightmare is never let them pick the start and the finish date. And all I mean by this is know exactly when the start and the finish date is supposed to be. You need to be very, very clear, because if you're giving it to the contractor to say, hey, you go ahead and take care of this whenever you're available, then what you're setting yourself up for is them putting other jobs in front of yours that may be more important to them. An owner may have more sense of urgency in that situation, and you're getting pushed back in the timeline. And ultimately, that's not what we want, because your whole goal is to rent this property, and rehabbing this property in a timely manner and renovating this property is very important to the success of your investment. So never let them pick the start and finish date. All right, number 4, how to avoid a contractor nightmare. This is all about knowing who's working on your property. So there's a couple of ways I look at this. First, from a trust factor, who is it? Do you know them? Do they have a good reputation in the market? Do you know other people who've used them? And then secondly, are they licensed and insured? This is very, very important. You don't want any kind of accidents. You don't want any kind of mishaps at the property, because you ultimately may be responsible for injuries or something else on the site of the property. And you want to avoid that at all costs. So know who you're hiring as your contractor. Now, here at Evernest, we obviously have all licensed and insured people. We've been working with our renovations crews for years and years and years. They're well vetted. We know everything about them. But if you're doing this by yourself, you need to do your due diligence. Don't just pick somebody out of a hat and hope that they do a good job. You definitely need to get, I would say, references. You need to see other things that they've completed. I would even ask to talk to clients, other investors, and get their feedback on the contractor. If it's a great contractor, they'll be happy to give you that information. And so the fifth tip to avoiding contractor nightmare is always get a contract. What you want is a scope of work, everything that's going to be done, like I mentioned before, and also the timeline that's going to be done and who's responsible for taking care of it. Everything needs to be laid out in some type of contract that you sign, that the contractor signs. This is really all about setting expectations. I was talking with Craig Bingston, who's our manager of all of our renovations here at Evernest, and he talks about this a good bit because it's very, very important that every single line item be listed out. So he was talking about being in a room that needed 3 plugs replaced. He's going to list those out line item by line item. That way, if something's not done, they can just review the contract and say, well, we agreed that this was going to be done and this was going to be done and this was going to be done. And it's not. So make sure that you have something in writing that you both agree on. You don't just want to have a handshake. You want to make sure it's in writing so that everybody has clear expectations. And really, just the summary of this whole thing is all about setting expectations, making sure you're handling due diligence on who you're hiring, making sure they're licensed and insured, and just doing the right thing. It's very, very tempting to take the shortcut, to take the easy way and hire somebody who's not licensed or insured. It's very tempting to hire somebody who's the cheapest out of the group. Maybe you interview 3 and they're the cheapest. It's very tempting to do that, but I can promise you this could come back and bite you and ruin your investment, not only experience, but ruin your investment returns. And that's not what you want. All right, if you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it. Please share it, subscribe to our channel, and we'll be back next week with some more investor videos just like this one.